Whenever I'm in a place of let's say, certain political consciousness, I intuitively want to disagree with whatever the most mainstream or palatable opinion in that place is. For example, when I grew up in the South, the deep rural South, I wanted to be as far left as humanly possible to as many people as humanly possible because that felt like it was oppositional, it was countercultural, it was going against the grain. And it felt satisfying to me to get the angry and often confused reactions that I got from people for espousing those views. Because more often than not, if the conversation went on for long enough, you would come to tell that those people were not actually invested in the ideas that they were saying that they believed in. Rather, they were invested in the social cohesion of that place. The idea that someone stuck out and stuck out so much in the place that they lived in irked them. And I enjoyed evoking such an uncomfortable response from people who wanted to uphold a certain hegemonic political consciousness in that particular place. If you fast forward a little bit and you see me in more liberal places that I've also lived in, I went way in the other direction. I wanted to talk about Jesus and gun rights and all manner of things that I don't have any particular investment in. I guess guns is an issue that I care about at least partially because I think they're pretty damn cool. But at the same time, my viewpoints on that issue have become a little bit more milquetoast over time because I can also see the very real harm that can be caused by them when they're in the wrong hands. So, you know, it kind of depends on what day it is, what I'll say on that issue. But regardless, when I've been in places that have had values totally antithetical to that of the gun rights crowd in this country, I wanted to espouse the gun rights position as much as humanly possible. And this is a sort of contrarianism that I find fulfilling to engage in, both because it gives me the chance to make the arguments of the other side in the most coherent way that I possibly can. In argumentation, this is called steel manning, where you try to build up the other side as much as humanly possible in order to either change your own position or strengthen your own position through better understanding the best arguments for the opposed position. So I would use the opportunity to steelman these arguments when I would be around people who disagreed with them. And especially, when I was in those liberal places, like if you asked me, if we had a heart to heart together about my actual positions are going to much, much more closely resemble that of the typical American liberal, or especially the progressive American liberal, then they're going to resemble a conservative or a libertarian. I mean that, or a right-wing libertarian specifically. That's just true. I can't get away from that fact. You look at my public statements, that is abundantly clear. But it's fun. It's fun and educational and fulfilling in its own right to entertain the other side and to, through talking to so many different people and also analyzing the data that is employed on both sides, to, in effect, or in pragmatic terms, take on that position. But I don't actually have that position. It's fun to piss people off. I don't know what other way to put it. Although, I think the internet has kind of posed a problem to people with a mindset like this. Now, what I mean by that is, on the internet, there is not really a hegemonic political consciousness. It's really fragmented and fractured. And so you have to hit people on an individual level. Like, you have to get an intimate understanding of whatever, like, brand of radicalism they seem to be engaging with, because unfortunately, more often than not, political extremism is what makes up the internet. It just doesn't have a particular bent. Like, it's not more right or left wing. It's just kind of all over the map. And in a way, that allows for more interesting discussions to take place, because you have a more diverse set of viewpoints rather than like copy pasted from whatever state or region you're from. But at the same time, I often feel like I am compelled to say just the most shocking things humanly possible that are so incoherent that you can't even really identify them with any side. Like, for example, recently I had this idea for a t-shirt based on a puppy that I have. I have a puppy that I humorously, at least to some, named Ghislaine Maxwell. For no reason other than the fact that I thought it would be funny to name a little innocent creature that. And I had this bright idea to put her behind the bars of a cage and take that image, cut it out, and superimpose it onto a white background with like the 60s flower power font, literally just saying, "Free Ghislaine Maxwell." And of course, I'm talking about the dog that's named that, but it has a double meaning, right? It's partly talking about the convicted sex trafficker and all around terrible human being. Like, that's just such an offensive statement to make to literally anyone you could be talking to. Like, it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on, you're going to find a statement like that disgusting. And for good reason. It's not true, she should not be free. But it's funny to say because you're not supposed to say it, because it's in opposition to literally everyone. Like, literally everyone finds this disgusting. This, to me, is the way that you kind of circumvent the fact that the internet does not have any particular political bent. It's kind of all over the place. You have to find new creative ways of making statements that are just going to make you sound disgusting to everyone. And these are really the kind of ideas that I like experimenting with online. Like, I made that video, Make Polyamory Mandatory, which was very clearly satirical. Like, the video literally contradicts itself. Like, or at least I was about to say really it's the character I'm playing. The character that I play in that video, in one breath, says that they support women's rights, and that they support women's rights so much that they don't want to impose their will onto the women that they're with. And at the same time that they're saying this as a sort of like advocacy for polyamory, they're also saying that there needs to be state-mandated GFs. Like, literally imposing your will on them, forcing them to be in the position of your harem or whatever. And like these statements very clearly cancel each other out. No human being on earth would believe things that are this absurd, but that's why it's funny. People thought that video was funny because it was so incoherent. And the fact that, uh, you know, the character that I was playing happened to be waving a prop around that looked like a realistic firearm only added to the shocking nature of the video. And that shock value, that disgust reaction, that's the only way that you can really be contrarian, countercultural, or oppositional on the internet now, I think, because like everyone has hollowed out these spaces online where they're able to espouse the same partisan viewpoints or these radical gradients of whichever side they may inhabit. And like it feels like because there's so much representation, broadly speaking, you can't actually piss people off. You can't actually be punk rock unless you just dip into the most ghoulish, disgusting territory possible. And that requires some creativity. Like, there were things that were said in that video that could only be said because I've argued from so many different perspectives that I could just kind of mash them together in a very schizophrenic manner. But anyhow, I bring all of this up because I was thinking about my friend, No Thank You, has been featured on the channel, both in person and over the internet many times over the years. But I was thinking about this argument that he often likes to employ about mass shooter demographics, where he defines mass shootings as any shooting involving the killing of more than 4 people, which is not how we define them in the United States. And he takes out these statistics to say that it is not actually white men who commit mass shootings, but rather black people. And he seems like weirdly obsessed with bringing this up. I'm not going to insinuate that it's like thinly veiled racism or something, because that's just a personal attack that's kind of impossible to prove. But I think it's frustration that stems from the constant discussion of mass shootings as something that is specifically like a white male, fragile white male problem. And I think it is when we're talking about school shootings and, these shootings that happen at public places that are just kind of indiscriminate violence, sometimes like a little bit like politically motivated, almost always like from the far right. But these are perpetuated by white men. I mean, this is true. And the reason that it's talked about from this standpoint is because there are specific social problems plaguing this group of people, be it a sense of emasculation that comes from the empowerment of women, or a sense of insecurity at the sight of immigration and other visible minorities becoming more visible, or, a contemporary alienation in the capitalist system. The fact that so many of these people do not have stable jobs in the way that their parents or grandparents did. These are all issues that are plaguing these individuals, and these individuals have their alienation validated more often than not by extremist, far-right figures who want to take advantage of that alienation that they're feeling in order to promote a extremist agenda. This is why we talk about those demographics. This is why we bring them up, because it is a very real phenomenon that is occurring that's also very dangerous. But I think, and I don't want to psychoanalyze him, but I think maybe he hears this stuff and then almost feels attacked in a way, because he probably sees the ongoing systematic abuse of autistic and eccentric people who happen to be from demographics that he's a part of, straight, white, male. And he's seeing these people get caught in the crossfire in the middle of this systematic crackdown on these, lonely 4chaners who have this kind of right-wing bent. The vast majority of those people are not going to perpetuate some kind of terrorist event, but they all get kind of lumped in the same box because they happen to fit into those demographics, and those demographics are being analyzed by people who don't understand them. Like, I'm able to make the same point that those left-wing or liberal or, I don't know, federal voices are making, but I can make them from the standpoint of someone who has actually explored a lot of these communities and listened to them say things, like had a heart-to-heart with these people and actually just listened to them. And that is something that a lot of the people making this, on the surface, correct critique refuse to do, because they see those demographic characteristics and they have been trained to dehumanize these people the moment that they see that they happen to be a part of those demographics, which does not help anybody. The only way that we're going to get through any of this is by having humanizing, genuine conversations with people that include them and that actually change a lot of these extremist perspectives. But I digress. So I think he's seeing all of this, and he's thinking, this can be used as an attack against me. And so he goes out and he says this stuff about mass shootings actually being perpetuated by black people. And I don't think he's aware of this. I don't think he has this intention. But in my opinion, this kind of rhetoric only snowballs into actual racism. I don't think he's there yet, but I think this is really dangerous rhetoric to be engaging in, because we all know that African Americans disproportionately commit violent crime. Everyone knows that. These are objective statistics. The question is, why? You're not saying anything brave or extraordinary merely by bringing up the statistics. What we need to be talking about is why this is occurring in the first place. And I would look at the history of redlining, Jim Crow, the GI Bill that prevented African Americans from being able to gain from the economic gains that the country as a whole got after World War II. There are any number of things that you can analyze that have contributed to the marginalization of this group. One issue that I talk all the time about is the war on drugs. That's a huge one right there. But regardless of what issue, we can analyze individually in regards to this demographic, there's a whole lot of them. And the idea that they just want to commit crime, which I'm not insinuating he's saying, but a lot of people who bring up those stats with no analysis whatsoever are insinuating that. And I think what's being said doesn't really matter as much as what's not being said when it comes to this stuff. Because if you go out there and say the 1350 statistic without any observation whatsoever, people can read whatever they want into that. And you're also telling yourself through not saying that it happens to be for all of these reasons, I feel like you're slowly memeing yourself into the perspective that it's because they're inherently like that or some other thing. And so through what's not said, you actually you actually tacitly endorse these hateful perspectives. And so I look at what he's saying here, and I can't help but feel like it's going to snowball into a further conservative rabbit hole, further down a conservative rabbit hole. And I think this is something that a lot of people who are contrary to the system or to the broader hegemonic perspectives that they see around them every day are particularly susceptible to. Like, I've been engaging in these kind of meme arguments, these arguments about stuff I don't really believe in for like 10 years. Like, I've been doing this since I was like 10 or 11. And I never ended up actually thinking a lot of the crazy shit that I was arguing for the sake of argument, because I knew what I believed at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I still held firm on the principles that we need an economy that works for everybody, which ultimately stemmed from the axiomatic position that fairness is good, that fairness in itself is good. And I have these certain very, very broad axioms that, moral axioms that I have had influence my positions on policy. And through looking at the data and having these discussions, I've come to certain policy positions that I am quite comfortable with, that I've been comfortable with for, basically my whole political life, which started a little earlier than a lot of people. I got pretty nerdy about this stuff early on, but I see this guy like flip-flopping like everywhere, like just all over the place, like a fish. And I can't help but feel like there's something that just doesn't ground this guy. It's like they're like a Schrodinger's cat or something. And I feel like this is a really dangerous game, because, it starts out with you thinking, oh, I just think this is funny. I just want to be kind of punk rock to the people I'm talking to. I just want to be interesting to myself. I'm just experimenting, tee-hee. And if you don't have like a solid foundation grounding you, if you don't really know what's true, you can become super susceptible to propaganda and fall down a bad rabbit hole. And again, like, I'm not trying to single this guy out and like shit on him or something, but I do get concerned when I see stuff like this, because I can't help but feel as though it could go to a very bad place. And that's ultimately the risk involved with having like a very free perspective on thought. Like what I was describing with how I approach arguments and how I think about things, it's a very freedom-centric position. I don't like feeling like other people control me. I don't like feeling like my thoughts and beliefs are contingent on any kind of externalities. I like to feel like they come from myself and the work that I've done. And so I completely understand his position. I also think that offending people is funny. I think that having a lot of these arguments is kind of inherently funny because none of it really matters. But just because everything is meaningless doesn't mean that people don't have feelings and aren't like living creatures that need to be respected. Like, it all comes back to that general heuristic, treat people the way that you would want to be treated. If I were black, I would not want to be prejudged as a criminal or a mass shooter merely because of the demographic that I happen to come from. And so I believe it's important to fight back against a lot of this racism and extremism because it's coming from a human place. Like, these things, they're not mutually exclusive. Like, you can be a nihilist and an edgy jokester or whatever, and also humanize people and acknowledge the fact that they are living, breathing creatures much in the same way that you are, and treat them with the same dignity and respect that you'd like to be treated with. The thing is, that extends to not just the way that we treat individuals, it extends to the way that we think about the broad groups that those individuals inhabit. Because in small ways, sometimes not in small ways, these perspectives that we harbor each day in our heads and with the words that we use come out one way or another in our actions. And that's a dangerous game. And so it's important to maintain the truth, to find the truth. And I can't help but feel as though some of us are playing a really dangerous game by playing fast and loose with the truth. And so, a word of advice to anyone who wants to play around with this kind of rhetoric, like, know where you stand. Whenever I have these sorts of conversations or take on views that I don't actually have, I always remember who I was before I said that stuff, and I remember after. If you can't do that, then I think you're going to get yourself into some major trouble. Maybe not immediately, maybe not 2 years from now even, but at some point. And that's a dangerous game. So, yeah, I guess these are my musings on my experience as a contrarian. And be careful out there, and don't be a dick while you're being a dick, or something.